As you probably know, Child Protective Service agencies always do a great job of making sure that children are safe. That's why when LaShawn Ragland reported that his friend Banita Jacks was starving her children, along with another report from a social worker that she was holding them hostage, CPS said absolutely nothing about it. After the death of her boyfriend in 2007, Banita went completely off the rails, isolating herself and her kids, as nobody was able to get in contact with them. Even as the children were pulled from school, multiple agencies came to check on them, but Banita just didn't answer the door. Banita's mother hadn't heard from her granddaughters in over 2 years, but on January 7, 2008, she found out what happened to them, as this case brought major legislation changes in the nation's capital. Welcome to History's Biggest Villains. Banita Jacks was born in Charles County, Maryland in 1974. According to her mother, she dropped out of school in the 10th grade when she found out she was pregnant with her first child, which she named Brittany. After having her second child, Tatiana, not long after, she met Nathan Fogel in 2000 at the salon she worked at as a hairdresser. Over the next 2 years, the couple added 2 more children to the fold, Nakaya and Asia. In 2005, Banita graduated from Aaron's Academy of Beauty in Waldorf with a license to practice cosmetology. The program director, Stacy Lynch, described Banita as a friendly woman, a good student, and a good mother. But apart from the family life at home, Banita had filed paternity suits against 3 men, with 2 being successful. The first case involved Norman Penn Jr., who was the father of her oldest daughter, Brittany. The next was against Kevin Stoddard, the father of her second daughter, Tatiana. Cork County records show that both men failed to pay child support, with Penn being convicted of criminal contempt and receiving a suspended sentence. But despite Banita's recent graduation, the family was struggling to make ends meet, as their town home in Waldorf was foreclosed. The family lived with Banita's mother, Mamie, for a while, but she didn't want Nathan to be there, so they eventually moved out. The family lived in various places before a non-profit organization helped them to move into the Washington, D.C. row house in August 2006. It was around this time that Banita and Brittany started butting heads, constantly arguing. The 17-year-old, who was very tall for a girl at 6'1", had fought with her mother twice and ran away on multiple occasions. In her police interview, Banita said that out of all her daughters, Brittany was the hardest to control because she was apparently possessed by a Jezebel demon, so she was starved and kept locked in her room so she wouldn't influence her sisters. LaShawn Ragland, a friend who lived with the family in 2006, admitted that he watched Banita and Nathan give marijuana to Asia and Nakaya, who were 3 and 4 at the time, laughing as the 2 little girls coughed their lungs out. Everything changed in February 2007 when Nathan died of cancer. Now faced with the stress of raising 4 daughters on her own, Banita completely isolated herself and her family, pulling her 2 eldest daughters out of school. She didn't attend Nathan's funeral, neglecting to even tell her 2 youngest daughters that their dad had died. A month after Nathan's death, neighbors reported seeing her and her children, along with the neighbor's daughter at McDonald's, noting that her daughters were always well groomed with their hair done. A month after that, the girls were wearing dingy white t-shirts and they had rags on their heads. Nathan's mother tried to visit her grandchildren after the funeral, but Banita either wouldn't let her in or would call her and tell her not to come back. Leopold Kelly, Brittany's boyfriend, visited her for the last time in March 2007. She had been absent from school for a month and she seemed sad. After this visit, she stopped responding to his calls and his MySpace messages. In April, Brittany's social worker Kathy Lopez made multiple attempts to confirm her safety. She worked at Booker T. Washington Charter School, which Brittany attended. On the 27th, she visited the Jacks' home with a police officer and another school employee, but Banita refused to let them inside, with her explaining to the officer that she was homeschooling their children. Kathy peered in through the window and noticed that the 2 younger girls appeared unkempt. She made several calls to the Child Family Services Agency and police after this.
Kathy Lopes says the girl's mother wouldn't let her in the home, but said she didn't want her daughter going to school because she was afraid she would run away. Lopes also reported seeing 2 or 3 of the youngest children who were not in school.
I wasn't allowed in the home, but from what I could see, the home did not appear clean. The children did not appear clean, and it seems that the mother is suffering from some mental illness in which she's holding all of her children in the home hostage.
3 days later, Police Sergeant James LaFranchise visited the Jacks' home and interviewed Banita in her front yard. He didn't file a report of the visit until 9 months later. In the initial report, he said that he had only seen the 3 younger girls on his visit, later saying that he hadn't been told to look for a teenager. Social workers visited the home several more times in the following weeks, but there was no answer when they knocked at the door. On May 10th, Lopez wrote a letter to the Youth Social Services Division of D.C. Superior Court, expressing her fear that Brittany was being held hostage, but these concerns weren't investigated. CFSA closed the case on May 16th, even though they couldn't locate the family. They believed they had moved to Maryland after finding the address of a relative they believed she was living with. By mid-June, however, Charles County officials said they couldn't locate the family either, but nothing was done to reopen the case. Banita seemed to have officially lost her mind by this point, moving all the furniture from her living room into the backyard, also losing weight at a rapid pace. She told a neighbor she often asked for cigarettes that she had cancer. As the months dragged on, Banita's former neighbor smelled a foul odor in the area, which some guessed was a dead rat. The last to see any of the children alive was neighbor and family friend Tawana Richardson, who delivered Social Security checks to her house twice a month. Tawana says she saw the two younger girls in the living room in June 2007, but she hadn't seen Brittany for over a month. Banita's mother, Mamie, hadn't seen her or her children since 2005, but she later said in court that she had no reason to believe the children were in danger, even after she called the Charles County Social Services Department in 2006, asking for information about the girls. But she, along with the entire city, would find out what happened to them on January 9th, 2008. Federal Marshals Kevin Ruark and Nicholas Garrett paid a visit to her house, serving an eviction notice. Banita answered the door, wearing only a white t-shirt with a dark brown smudge on it, again refusing to let the officers inside, trying to stall by asking to see proof of the eviction. When the marshals identified themselves, she tried to shut and lock the door, but Kevin placed his foot in the path of the door and the two men made their way inside the dark house. Immediately upon entrance, they saw religious markings scribbled all over the wall, smelling an odor they likened to rotting meat or stink bait. Banita tried to get in their way, but they pushed past her and walked up the staircase. Once they reached the top, they could see the bodies of Tatiana, Nakaya, and Asia lying in the first bedroom. They were all wearing white t-shirts and were lined up according to age. The corpses were in an advanced state of decomposition, as coroners later used the presence of insects around the bodies to determine that the girls had been dead for about 7 months. Even with nature taking its course, investigators could make out ligature marks on all their necks. Asia had evidence of blunt force injury to her head. Brittany's body was found in a different bedroom, nude and face down in a pool of blood. She had multiple puncture wounds in her abdomen and a knife was placed next to her body, but there were no fingerprints or DNA traces on it. Since the bodies had decomposed so badly, the police couldn't say definitively whether the strangulation caused the deaths of the younger children. Banita was promptly arrested, and during her 8-hour interrogation, she consistently told homicide detectives that demons possessed her daughters, but she was confident that they would return from the dead when the demons died. She described a chaotic life after her boyfriend Nathan Fogel died of cancer in February 2007. He appeared to her in a dream and told her that all 4 girls would be taken from her. To stop my suffering, Nathaniel took them, she said, but they would be resurrected. Fogel continued, telling her in the dream that for them to be together again, she would have to suffer. He was trying to protect me, she said. When the detectives told her that Nathan had died, she corrected them, saying, he went to sleep. Asia died in her sleep first, she said, while her 2 sisters lived with the body in their bedroom. According to her, one of the sisters thought Asia's death was funny. They didn't care. Nakaya died the next night, then Tatiana, who had green stuff pouring out of her mouth and nose. The weaker the girls got, the weaker the demons got, she said. When asked about her oldest daughter, she said Brittany was inside another bedroom pounding on the walls. I know what's going on in there and I know what you're doing. I'm going to get you, Jacks quoted Brittany as saying. One day she found Brittany lying on her back on the hardwood floor with her mouth open. She saw her from the doorway but didn't go inside the room. Eventually, Banita put all the furniture outside for trash pickup because the demons had infiltrated everything in the house. Spirits and demons have a different smell, so little by little I had to get rid of everything, she said. When detectives Daryl Richmond and Mitchell Creedle asked her how Brittany died, she said she would rather talk to her attorney. At one point, the detectives became irritated because she would not reveal how the girls were killed. They also kept asking why she didn't seek help, but she remained silent. Banita was charged with 4 counts of felony murder, 4 counts of premeditated first-degree murder, and several child cruelty charges. If convicted on all murder charges, she faced a mandatory life sentence. She pleaded not guilty to all counts, but she waived her right to a jury trial, so the case would be decided solely by Judge Frederick Weisberg. From the onset, Banita's defense informed the judge that she wouldn't take the stand, so it was time for prosecutor Michelle Jackson to present the closing argument. She said in the months before their deaths, Jacks mistreated her daughters, denied them food, and isolated them from family and friends. The murders were the climax of a scheme that she connived. She placed them in their own prison of torture, not on foreign soil, but in her own home, she said. It was systematic and methodical. Jackson pointed to testimony from relatives, neighbors, and others who described how they no longer saw the girls and how Jacks made her home appear vacant. Also, expert witnesses confirmed that the eldest girl, with whom Jacks had conflicts, was stabbed and the younger 3 were strangled. Jacks hid the bodies because she didn't want anyone to hold her accountable, Jackson said. She had hoped she would have another year before being evicted, by which time the bodies would have disappeared. Banita's attorney Peter Krauthammer disputed the prosecution's claims, saying that the government relied on shaky testimony from witnesses and failed to prove that Jacks is guilty. In his arguments, he said prosecutors were asking the judge to rely on some statements from Jacks' brutal interrogation with police, but then tell him to dismiss the rest. The government can't have it both ways, he said. According to him, the timing of certain events that prosecutors highlight as significant, such as when Jacks got rid of all her furniture, is entirely not clear. He also said testimony from scientists devolved into a battle of experts who provided conflicting information and failed to determine when and how the girls died. Krauthammer also dismissed child cruelty allegations against Jacks, asking why neighbors and others didn't hear any cries from the girls. They were, oh my God. It's a tough case, he said, but that doesn't mean standards for finding guilt should change. This case is anything but simple. There was no proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Outside the courthouse, a woman named Tamara Crump, who spent the day with Banita in the cell-block area, told reporters that she admitted to killing her children. She kept talking about her kids had demons in them, Crump said. She smelled like death. That woman is crazy. The odor of decomposition had stuck to Banita's body, and it was so strong that the other prisoners in her block asked for mass. Judge Weisberg came to a decision, finding Banita guilty on all counts, sentencing her to 120 years in prison. But now that the criminal was in jail, the fallout from this case would be massive, especially once residents found out that child services knew about the condition of the home, along with existing drug problems, but chose not to intervene. 2 days after the discovery of the bodies, Mayor Adrian Fenty announced findings of a preliminary investigation of district agency involvement and introduced reforms to take place in response to the tragedy. In April 2009, the D.C. Office of the Inspector General released a report implicating not only the CFSA, but several other local government parties for failing to meet their obligations in the Jacks case and potentially prevent the 4 deaths. The Washington Post reported, the family was supposed to receive monthly visits based on its housing placement. It never did. The school system didn't follow through when the girls dropped out of school. Police didn't fully investigate when they were called to the house, and healthcare providers didn't follow up on the things that should have been red flags. To address the lack of agency communication and coordination, Mayor Adrian Fenty proposed legislation that was passed into law. This bill amended confidentiality rules to make them less rigid and more aligned with what is permitted under federal privacy laws such as HIPAA and FERPA. In 2014, the city agreed to pay $2.6 million in a settlement to the heirs of the 4 children killed by Banita. Thank you guys. This case, Jesus Christ, man. I have a couple things I can take away from this. Number one, Banita is mentally unstable. But that leads to my second question. As the family of these children, why are you not consistently checking up? Why are you not pounding the door? Why are you not busting down the doors to help these children? Like, you know that this woman is mentally unstable. As a mother, as a grandmother, why are you not contacting your children for 3 years? Like, what type of grandmother are you? You mean to tell me, oh, I haven't talked to my granddaughters in 3 years, but I think they're okay. Like, as much as it is the fault of the Child Protective Agency, it's the family's fault too. You guys are with the children all day. All they can do is send a person. Like, you guys are there all the time. Oh my God. And then this settlement is crazy. Now you want to care? Now you want to act like you care about these kids? Now that there's money to gain, now you want to act like, you know, the city made such a grave mistake. They did such a bad thing. Like, okay, the city's at fault, but it's part of your guys' fault too. Like, you neglected 4 children and they died because of your neglect too. I actually have the news clip of people's actual reactions in the city to this settlement that they got. So definitely enjoy that. But leave a like, hit that subscribe button, turn my post notifications on. Thank you. Please be safe. I'm out. Peace.
The murders of 4 young girls at the hands of their mother in Washington sparked outrage across the nation.
And that outrage grew when it was learned D.C. social services had been asked to help the children, but they didn't. And now the D.C. government is paying millions to the children's family. Our D.C. Bureau Chief, Sam Ford, is in Northwest Washington. And Sam, not everyone agrees with the settlement, right?
Well, indeed, Candace, the city's attorney general said that the family sued the city for $10 million. So settling for $2.6 was in the city's best interest, though some in the neighborhood of those victims questioned how interested those family members were when the victims were still alive.
I don't think the city should award the grandparents or nobody in particular to that amount of money.
In the neighborhood where authorities in 2008 discovered 4 girls murdered at the hand of their mother, Banita Jacks, a number of the residents today asked why the city's paying the relatives of the girls a settlement.
But to find out that someone whose blood relation didn't do what they needed to do, the same way that those social workers and other public servants were persecuted for lack of taking care of their responsibilities.
The city fired social workers for failing to follow up on complaints complaints from schools that might have prevented some of the children's deaths. Though one grandmother who's receiving funds, Banita Jacks, testified in court she'd neither seen nor heard from the children in 2 years.
They said the city was responsible for this. We think there's a very good argument that the city was not responsible for the tragic deaths of these 4 children.
So why pay $2.6 million?
But we believe that if it had gone to a jury would be very sympathetic.
The $2.6 million settlement acknowledges negligence on D.C.'s part, paying $1 million each in the deaths of the 5- and 6-year-olds, less for the deaths of the older children. 16-year-old Banita Jacks' father, Norman Penn, told us by phone, "I wanted D.C. to admit they were wrong, that things were mishandled." Still, for neighbors,
my mom tells me every day, you know, if I go a week without hearing from you, I'm assuming something's wrong, and she'll send my brothers over here.
Banita Jacks was sentenced to 120 years. She is currently in a prison mental health hospital in Fort Worth, Texas. The $2.6 million settlement requires the family to donate about $500,000 of that to a children's charity and to a family education fund. The attorneys will get about $1 million of it. Reporting live from the John Wilson Building, Sam Ford, ABC 7 News.